Hey, folks, and welcome to another edition of Dawg Walk Talk, presented to you by DawgsHQ. As always, I'm your host, Jake Roos, and with me, as always, the man, Palmer Toms. Palmer, signing day's over, man. Did you finally get some sleep?
Just a little bit. But had I been covering the Jags, I probably would have missed the Urban Meyer news, breaking that past midnight. Dirty move of the Jags press company.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was worried about doing Urban Meyer any favors at this point. So glad we're covering Georgia recruiting and not the Jags, that's for sure. Signing day, like I said, kind of came and went. And, I characterize this one as one of the quieter ones that I've had to cover in terms of Georgia recruiting. A lot of the hay was already in the barn. And I say quiet, and I think sometimes people take that to mean bad, but I think that that's actually a really fine instance in this occasion because, the way I look at it, you don't have any big surprises in terms of guys flipping elsewhere. Maybe Marquise Groves Killebrew late in the day, those winds started blowing pretty heavily yesterday morning that could happen. And that's a bit of a surprise, I guess, in the sense that he had been Georgia's longest tenured commit, certainly. But, other than that, just not a ton of surprise out there. One guy commits on signing day to Georgia. That's Marvin Jones Jr. We'll definitely get into that. And that was an impactful one for sure. But for the most part, you sign all your guys and everything's kind of looking hunky-dory.
Yeah, I tweeted it out at 4:15 because we were just coming out of the Kamari Wilson announcement. And I said, it's 4:15. Georgia has not added a commitment today. And, a lot of people would take that, negatively. But the thing that you've got to remember if you're a Georgia fan is Georgia had the number one recruiting class in the country going into signing day. That means that they already had some pretty damn good players. And so you don't necessarily need to add anyone else. Obviously Texas A&M and Alabama surge above them with the additions that they got, but that doesn't mean that Georgia doesn't have a good recruiting class. It was number one going into the day, and that was with a lot of commits already in from schools all around the country. So, I think that what people sometimes forget is that signing day is the celebration of this signing class. It's the culmination of this signing class to an extent. You still have February, you still have these January 8th decisions to announce, but it's the culmination of months and years of work, not just that one day. So what Kirby Smart and his staff did over, and you got to remember with this recruiting class, they weren't able to get on campus until June 1st. So essentially they worked all of June, all of July, all of August, all of September, October, November, and half of December. You're looking at 6.5 months of being able to get these guys on campus. Plus there's dead periods in there as well. So you've got to keep that in mind with this recruiting class. It's not just about what happened yesterday on Wednesday, the first day of the early signing period. It's about what's happened over the last several months and years.
Yeah. And, I think that everybody has to take into account that essentially, we missed an entire year of in-person evaluations, of visits, everything really, with the coronavirus shutdowns. And so, that shaped all of this in a very interesting way. And I think, made for some kind of relationships that you had to build on the fly in some degree. But yeah, I think, I think there's a lot for Georgia to be pleased about the day. And, like I said, I wrote it in the recap that I did last night. Quiet is good in this instance. And you got the news that you wanted. I mean, quite frankly, Monday and Tuesday were more insane than Wednesday was. And so I think that's pretty interesting. You don't see that often, but Drew Bobo, and then you get Chandler Smith, and then Dalen Everett's involved. That's three in the run up to signing day. So, and I told people as well, and I really do believe this, I don't think it mattered what happened, what anybody else did yesterday. because of what Travis Hunter did. There was not going to be any capturing the narrative by any team, regardless of who they signed or what they did. His was the national story of the day. It captured every mind, positive and negative. I heard reactions in both regards, but the fact of the matter is, just like Deion Sanders, he kept him talking, man. And that was what that was kind of all about. So, kudos to Travis. I think it's a really cool thing, but it obviously didn't go Georgia's way. Well, it didn't go the way I think anyone expected when the morning started. But at any rate, let's dive in a little bit.
And one thing that I'm going to hop in here real quick before we dive in is you mentioned those Monday and Tuesday commitments. Those very easily could have happened on Wednesday. And I think that Georgia fans probably would have come out of signing day feeling a lot better, maybe. It would have been a very different feeling had those happened on Wednesday and Georgia picked up 4 guys on Wednesday versus just one. But like you said earlier, the one that they picked up, very impactful. We'll break that down. And you've also got to keep in mind that there's 2 guys out there announcing on January 8th at that All-American Bowl, 2 guys that would be very impactful to add to this recruiting class. We don't really know one way or another whether they did sign yesterday or whether they will sign over these next 2 days and where they signed. But Georgia is certainly in the running for both of those guys, Kristen Miller and Ernest Green, that is.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really true. And both of those guys would go a long way to shaping this class. I'd be interested to know personally if they could push Georgia ahead, maybe even a little bit. Maybe they could overtake Alabama. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that would shape things. It certainly would hurt their chances, obviously, to add a couple guys of that caliber. But yeah, you've got a couple pieces left out there. I think you've got a couple pieces that maybe you're watching going into February. Can they get back, back? I don't mean to say back in it with Shamar Stewart. I don't think they're out necessarily, but can they kind of put themselves back in the driver's seat?
And that's if he doesn't end up announcing here during this early signing period.
Yeah, sure. Who knows? I mean, who knows what anybody's going to do at this point in this day and age when it comes to recruiting? I think we found that out in a big way yesterday. But let's dive in a little bit on this class, Palmer, and talk about some of these guys. I guess from your perspective, looking at it, I've got my own thoughts on this, obviously, and I'll touch on those in a minute. But I'm curious as to what you think, because well, I mean, you're a team guy, right? You shouldn't be following recruiting as hard as I do. I guess, was there a position group that particularly stood out to you? A couple signees who stood out to you? I mean, what caught your attention when you're looking at this group?
Well, I think that this is something that we've talked about in terms of recruiting on here several times, talked about it in our personal conversations. Defensive back was a position of need in this signing class, and they hit it hard. They didn't hit it out of the park like they might have wished. Maybe they probably still hit it out of the park. I mean, you bring in 3 5-stars, maybe not the grand slam, the Jorge Soler shot that they might have wished, but missing on Kamari Wilson, losing Marquise Groves Killebrew, not getting Travis Hunter, not getting Dion Bowie. Obviously those things, if any of those had played out differently yesterday, we would have been having a very different conversation. But the fact is, Georgia still signed 3 5-stars in the secondary and a 4th top 100 player. Malachi Starks is a player that really excites me. I've seen him play in person. I've interviewed him. I've sat down with him. I've talked to his coach before. This is a kid that I think really can do it all for Georgia. He's somebody that I'm really excited to watch and see how the Bulldogs use him, because I think that he's done it both ways for Jefferson. I don't necessarily see him playing offense at Georgia, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think that, elsewhere in the secondary, Starks is probably more that hybrid star player. Kirby said yesterday when we asked him about it, that they don't necessarily recruit specific to star. It is its own position. But when they recruit somebody that could play star, they also could play safety or they could play corner. And he said that's really the case anywhere, not just in the secondary, but when you're recruiting an offensive lineman, you recruit them to play guard and tackle or guard and center. You anywhere on this team, if you're a running back, you're also developing your skill set as a wide receiver out in space. If you're an outside guy at wide receiver, you're developing it at the slot position. If you're a defensive tackle, you're developing your skill set as a defensive end, developing the outside linebacker skill set, outside linebackers, inside, all over the field. So I think that with Starks, that's certainly something that's interesting to me. But I think that when you look at the corners that Georgia brought in, they really do it all in terms of they cover every possible skill set. With Jaheim Singletary, you've got somebody that he's got above average speed, but he's not a burner by any means. But he is long. 6'2", 175, 33-inch arms. He can cover. And I think if you watch the film, he's not necessarily going to, fly with receivers, but he can make up ground that he might have lost with the speed in terms of his sheer length. He's number 25 player in the country, number 4 corner, 5-star there. I'll skip over the second 5-star for now because I think that he's kind of the hybrid of the two, and move down to Julian Humphrey, the third corner that Georgia signed, number 92 player in the country, 4-star, number 12 player at his position. Anytime you're a top 100 player, you're a really good football player. You don't have to just be a 5-star, not the 32. The 32 5-stars are incredible football players, but there aren't just 32 good football players in this signing class. So bringing in a 4-star corner in Julian Humphrey is a huge addition. He is a burner. Won the fastest man competition at the opening finals. Ran a, 10.55 100 prior to his senior year of high school. The kid can fly. And I think that, when you combine the length of what Singletary has and the speed that Humphrey has, you get the polished product that Dalen Everett is. And I think that was a huge addition for Georgia on Tuesday. Sure. He was the fastest guy in terms of, 40 times on that IMG roster preseason, which says a lot. He ran I think it was a 4.4440. That's a tongue twister there. But he's also got the 33-inch arms that Singletary has. So I think that when you're looking at the most polished product in this class, it very well could be Dalen Everett, and there is playing time to be had in that secondary. Georgia has lost or will lose upwards of a dozen players in that secondary over the last 2 seasons. Lost 8 guys total last year. You're looking at several guys facing NFL decisions or eligibility decisions after this year. So I think that's certainly a position that Georgia needed to attack, and they did so in the secondary.
Yeah, to me, that's got to be the standout, just because of the number of guys they brought in there, and you get 3 5-stars back there. You should kind of be able to overhaul that pretty quickly, I think. And we actually had somebody ask me earlier, where does Malachi Starks play? And I do think that's an interesting question, because I said you kind of get into what scientists call the Jamari Salyer conundrum. The are we going to fill him at the most pressing need, or are we going to put him where we think he is the best suited? I think that he's a guy who could go either way. To me, I think you have to probably start him out with a look at safety, because it feels like after Kamari Wilson doesn't come, there is some availability back there. So I think he and Ja'Cory Thomas kind of get first run looks there. But Star makes a lot of sense to me. I'm with you on the wide receiver angle when it comes to Malachi Starks. I don't know that that's not his best position, if I'm being honest with you. But regardless, the kid's a tremendous athlete. He'll be able to plug in somewhere. Dalen Everett, I really don't even know that we've had time to appreciate and process that news. Just because
we haven't. Because we haven't. if you listened to our show on Tuesday, we were saying, oh, Georgia's in it for Dalen Everett. And by the time that it came out, he might have even been committed. I think it came out as soon as we were done recording. So you're right. We haven't, as a site, as the two of us haven't had time to, comprehend how big that addition was on Tuesday.
Sure. And I mean, it just kind of like, I don't know, man. You got to love those that almost just fall into your lap. And, after Brent Venables goes to Oklahoma, I mean, it essentially just fell into Georgia's lap. And, we talked over the weekend and I said, well, you can't feel good about a kid going to Alabama on their final official visit weekend and the chances of landing them after that. But sure enough, the Bulldogs are able to pull it off, man. And a coup, I think. I think just an abs, just to cop a phrase from an old friend, pennies from heaven. I mean, that's exactly what you wanted to see, and a chance to really make an impact. And I think a kid who can get in there and like you said, there's available time, and I think that these guys can vie for it. Now I'll be honest with you. I expect Georgia will probably still go after another defensive back in the transfer portal because I think you want somebody with some experience back there as well. I think that's something that they value. But these guys, based on all the measurables and everything we know about them, to some degree, should be able to kind of reshape the face of the defensive backfield for Georgia. I think elsewhere, if I'm looking around, I make no qualms about this. I've mentioned this on Twitter, and I think that linebacker duo of Jalen Walker and Cedric Washington is outstanding. I think that those are two really, really great players. Now, you would have had a real cherry on top if you had Shamar James. I think out of those, if you could have had that trio, that would have been insane. But that duo is still ridiculous. Two very, very explosive and talented guys when you're talking about Washington and Walker. And, Walker, I think, sort of a vocal leader for this class. So a lot of people are familiar with him. I think CJ is a guy that maybe gets overlooked a little bit because he was a lot quieter in his recruitment. He committed to Georgia, and that was kind of it. Like, there wasn't a lot of drama around it. Kind of felt like he knew where he wanted to be the whole time. So I think that, maybe, like I said, maybe he's overlooked a little bit, but I think both of those guys can be impact makers. What's interesting, though, and I've had a lot of people kind of ask questions about this and talk about this. I mean, both of us are sitting here talking about this defense, and that makes sense to me that you would have a great defensive class, right? I mean, after the year Georgia had on defense, seems pretty logical that they would be able to sell playing in that defense. We're not talking a lot about the offense, though, and I don't think that that's necessarily a black mark on the offense necessarily, as much as it is just kind of giving credit to what the defense has done and where the defense looks like it's headed. They got some good pieces on the offense. CJ Smith, to me, was, I don't know that there was a bigger late addition. And I'm talking Dalen Everett and Marvin Jones Jr., because you needed some wide receiver help, and you needed a guy, quite frankly, who's a burner. And you get him in a 6', 390-pound frame. This kid, you mentioned Julian Humphrey wins fastest man at the opening with runs a 100-meter 10.55. That's blazing speed. This kid's 6'3", 190, and he runs a 10.28. I mean, he's absolutely flying, dude. And people used to talk that, I remember when like Tyson Campbell came out of high school, and people were like, "Oh my God, this kid runs a 10.39," and which is ridiculous. I'm not downgrading that. The point I'm trying to make is this kid is fast as hell, man. This kid is ridiculously fast, and I think Arian Smith has been supposed to be that guy for Georgia. And he has been in the limited availability he's had. But otherwise, he's been pretty banged up throughout his career and just hasn't had a lot of availability. So I think that a guy with a durable frame like this, a big durable frame, you could almost say that Arian is a track first guy. And I think probably, that may be where his future is, in fact, moving beyond college. This kid is I think this kid's a true wide receiver. Now there's some development, to still be done, as there is with anybody, but I think this kid is, man, you just couldn't have had a better late ad than CJ Smith, in my estimation, when you're talking about offense.
Jake, how many meters do you think you could cover in 10-2?
That's a good question. Probably, I'd like to think I could get to 50. I could probably do half of what he does in the same amount of time. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And make no mistake about it, I am a terrible athlete. I'm not. I'm not even going to say that I'm like good. I'm a terrible athlete. But this kid, like I said, I think big get for Georgia. Drew Bobo came on board in this last kind of couple days leading up to signing day. I think he's kind of a 5-tool player when you're looking at his film. He's a guy who can slot probably anywhere. You got to think, if you're looking for a center, how about a big guy whose dad is a great offensive mind? You think he can probably control a huddle and maybe understands a little bit of depth when you're talking about the playbook? I think the kid will be able to pick it up pretty quick. So, I don't know. I mean, what's your feel on this offense? Because I'm a little conflicted. I mean, I think that it could have been better, and I think that they took some swings on some of these guys. To me, the offensive line class is not as strong as you would like it. I think that some of those guys are developmental prospects. Jacob Hood, to me, is a guy that you want to get in because of his. I mean, he's as big as a house. I mean, he's 6'8", 335. I mean, he's a giant. But can he play tackle? I don't know that yet, and I don't know that anybody does. But you get him in here, and you figure that out. You take your chances with that lump of clay. They don't have as many ready-made guys as I think that they've had in the previous years. Is the only thing, in my opinion.
Well, and I think part of the reason behind that is, if you look at, from the team perspective, what Georgia is going to be losing on defense versus what they're losing on offense, they are probably going to bring back most of their significant contributors on the offensive side of the ball.
Sure.
I mean, you're looking at probably 2 running backs that are out. Well, the best offensive player that they bring in is a running back. The only top 50 player in the country that they bring in on the offensive side of the ball is at the running back position. And I think that you're replacing, that Branson Robinson is somebody that could come in and play. I think that at receiver, you probably are only, this is without transfers, you're probably only losing one guy there, in George Pickens. And that's not a certainty either. I mean, I think that there is a chance that he could come back. I wouldn't put it.
Kyrus has to graduate at some point, doesn't he?
He has another year of eligibility.
Well, that's true. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that, Kyrus is a junior this year, according to eligibility. So I think that, you're probably, he's actually got 2 more years of one more after this year. I think that what you're bringing in on offense fills the few needs that you're going to have there. I think that you're more often than not, you're never going to bring in an offensive lineman that you can plug and play as a freshman. Those kids don't come around very often.
Yeah, the Andrew Thomases of the world are not hanging on trees.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I don't know that there is, there are many of those in this class at all.
I agree. I agree with that.
Kirby even said that today or yesterday, and said that essentially, if you look at this class, there are not as many ready to go, and you compare it to the last couple of classes, you probably wouldn't have very many 5-star offensive linemen. Now, you've based on how recruiting works, and you've got to have a certain amount of 5 stars and a certain amount of 4 stars and blah 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 blah. Well, you're going to have some linemen that fit into that 5-star offensive lineman, 4-star offensive lineman mold, but they probably would be 4 and 3 stars in previous classes.
Sure.
So, I think what Georgia is bringing in on the offensive line, like you said, is developmental. They're probably losing Justin Schaefer and Jamari Salyer there. But you're going to be able to plug in guys from these past classes that were very talented on the offensive line, and Georgia pulled very good offensive line classes into those spots. I mean, Broderick Jones has already shown this year that he's capable of playing. So, you don't have to have a guy that, from this recruiting class that you're going to have to count on there.
Well, and the number that I make a point to tell people this too. The numbers in these last 2 classes were really big. Georgia spent heavily when it came to scholarship spots on the offensive line.
Yes.
Now, whether or not that all pays off, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is they've got bodies stacked up in that room, and they've got a lot of really talented and highly rated guys stacked up in that room. So It's a little harder sell than they've got previously. And I'll say this too, and I think it's true. People, I think to some degree, got spoiled by that Sam Pittman era of offensive line recruiting. And I think Matt Luke is a fine recruiter and does a good job, but I don't think he's Sam Pittman.
There's a reason that Sam Pittman is a head coach now.
Well, yes. Well, and that Matt Luke used to be. So
I wasn't going to say that part, but yeah, I was thinking it.
Well, I mean, so the fact of the matter is, I think it's a little, it's different. Okay. I don't think Matt Luke is as strong of a recruiter as Sam Pittman is. And I don't think that there are many guys who are. That's not like I'm saying Matt Luke sucks, but Sam Pittman's a special recruiter. I think that this is a situation too, though, where he was kind of up against it from a numbers perspective. Now, can these guys turn out to be good players? Absolutely. I mean, Jacob Hood is exactly the mold you're looking for. He's got that Isaiah Wilson size to kind of take it back to that era. Drew Bobo, like I said, if you want a guy who's probably got a grasp on how offenses work, I would say it's probably Drew Bobo, probably more so than any kid in this class. Alu Ba played great competition in practice every day at IMG Academy. Griffin Scroggs, same thing. I mean, you're talking about 7A ball at Grayson, some of the highest level that you can play in the nation, some of the best talent that you could play. He's going against it week in and week out. And then that possibility existing out there of Ernest Green, also kind of compelling, I think. And that, to me, that would really, I think, shift the perception of this class if you land Ernest Green, because suddenly you feel like you got at least one guy who is almost close to ready-made.
Yeah. And I think that when you look at we've talked a lot about the offensive line. I think that when you look at those other players that they're bringing in on offense, whether it's Branson Robinson, whether it's Oscar Delp, whether it's Gunnar Stockton, those are 3, top 100 players at their, overall, and top 10 players at their position. To me, I think that, and we said this when it happened, but when Kirby Smart was talking about needing elite tight ends, he was talking directly to Oscar Delp.
Sure.
And we've seen how well Georgia has used the tight end this year, and that dynamic skill set of a tight end with Brock Bowers. I'm not going to say that Oscar Delp can come in and do the exact same thing next year, because he's going to be competing with Brock Bowers for snaps over the next 2 years too. But I think that he's got a ready-made skill set for college football. I think that Branson Robinson, like I said, you're going to have to replace 2 running backs. Well, you've got good running backs behind them. Even though I'm a Dejan Edwards hater, pretty good guy there, along with Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton. But Branson Robinson could very easily factor into the rotation as a freshman. Gunnar Stockton, not going to be your quarterback next year, but I don't think that you ever really plan on bringing in a quarterback to start as a freshman. And I think that he's going to be a fixture in that competition once it's his turn, once it's Brock Vandegrift's turn. I think that those 2 guys are going to be competing against each other for playing time. When you bring in elite level quarterbacks, top 10 quarterbacks in their class in back-to-back years, those 2 guys are going to be tied hand in hand in terms of their development and their playing time.
And I think we can both be honest in saying, I mean, this is how I feel. I assume you feel the same way. quite frankly, we don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback room going into next.
Not at all.
I mean, so it's not that far out of the realm of possibility to think that like Brock and Gunner are going to have to be ready, because they might get shoved into something, because who knows what the hell is going to happen. I think all options.
I don't think, let's put it this way. I don't think Georgia is going to have 5 scholarship quarterbacks next year.
I can almost
in Stetson Bennett, JT Daniels, Carson Beck, Brock Vandegrift, and Gunnar Stockton.
I can assure you they will not.
I don't think that they are going to have that. I think that there's a good chance that they're probably more likely to have 3 than they are 5.
I think so too. I feel exactly the same.
So that would mean 2 guys are leaving this room from the guys that are currently there, which would probably look towards either Stetson Bennett or JT Daniels and Carson Beck.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Because I don't know that Brock Vandegrift is going to be out after 1 year, and Gunnar Stockton, it seems very committed to UGA and signed his name on that paper. If he wasn't wanting to be a part of that room, he would have looked elsewhere.
Sure. No, I'm with you. And, I think too, Gunnar to me is really interesting because I think he combines a little bit of both of what you see in JT and the things that you like about Stetson. He's got a cannon arm, and then simultaneously he's a really, really good athlete and can get out there and scramble and extend plays. And to me, that's got to be really attractive. I think if you're Monken and you're thinking about, what you needed from your quarterback position and what you wish you'd have had more of this year, he brings that element. Like you said, I mean, look, freshman quarterback, in my opinion, even as talented as a kid can be, that's not an ideal situation. You want a situation where there's I think a bridge to some degree, a chance for this kid to learn, get to know your system intimately, get to understand it in the depths, and win the respective teammates. Come in and establish himself as a grinder and a locker room leader, and all of those attributes that you look for. I think that's all very important, and something that Gunnar Stockton's got a chance to do. Now, I agree with you, though, too. I think 3 is more likely than 5 when you're talking about Georgia's number next year. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think Gunnar Stockton's going to be an important piece. And I think that, unlike what you saw this year, I think that you might get a little bit more look than, say, a freshman Brock Vandegrift got last year.
Well, and let's assume that we are in that model of 3. Like you said, Gunnar or Brock is going to have to be ready to be that backup quarterback next year in all likelihood. So, in that 3 scenario, those 2 guys are probably competing for that backup spot.
Sure.
And I think that, it's going to be very interesting to watch those 2, 2 Georgia guys, 2 semi-local guys, Brock very local, Gunnar not too far away. I think that, these are 2 guys that Georgia fans are very familiar with. Let's put it that way. That these are 2 guys that played on a national spotlight against each other, during Gunnar's junior season and Brock's senior season. Yeah. Those 2 guys are going to be tied hand in hand in their development and their playing time, and their careers, for better or for worse, are going to be defined by each other.
Yeah. No.
And I think that's the situation you're looking at with these quarterbacks. I think that, overall, I think we've talked a lot about the offense, after not touching on it for a while, we've talked a lot about it, but I think that what you're bringing in here are some really good pieces that can be, developmental pieces. You're not outside of Branson Robinson and Oscar Delp, maybe CJ Smith, depending on how he develops in terms of, coming in and making an immediate impact. I think that you're probably looking at those 2, maybe 3 in terms of guys that will be seeing the field next year. You're probably not going to see a ton of these guys on offense, but I do think that there's a good chance that you see a lot of them on defense.
All right. Now, let me ask you this, because I'm curious. You're the player that excites you the most in this class.
It's Malachi Starks.
Really? Is it?
It's Malachi
Way to
Starks.
go! Way to go with the off the radar pick, the highest rated in the whole class. Paul.
No, but I think I've been pretty adamant on that for a while now. And it might be a little biased because I have seen him play. I have talked to him, but I think that just his versatility, he's listed as an athlete for a reason. And I think that, that there aren't many kids that you say, legitimately could play either way. And Malachi is that kind of player. I think that the fact that he has been such a dynamic player on both sides of the ball, a lot of these guys have, because they are the best athlete on their team and have been since they were, since they started football. But Malachi has been the most athletic kid on his team and will continue to be one of the most athletic kids on his team. Even as a freshman, I think that the versatility, the ability to possibly play on either side of the ball. I'm not going to say he's going to play both ways. I think he could play either side of the ball.
Sure.
That's what excites me the most about him.
Okay.
How about you?
Well, I was looking over the list again, and honestly, the one that excites me the most probably is a guy who didn't even sign yesterday, and that's Darius Smith. I just because I think that there's a lot of raw, untapped potential when you're talking about Darius Smith. But he also addresses a big need. And I think Marvin Jones Jr. is obviously in that same vein. They're going to play the same position, kind of that outside linebacker, edge rusher that, has kind of become the hybrid that everybody looks for these days.
As you call it, a slash.
Yeah, sure. Or the jack as it is often called. I think that those guys to me are the most exciting, because if you can find, and Michael Williams falls under that as well. So wait for me to go out on a limb with him as well. But
yeah, wow. I took the top player and you took the next two.
Yeah. But no, the thing about those guys that excites me the most is if you can find a guy who can consistently do that, consistently get to the quarterback, that's a game changer, man. That's huge. And in this era of college football, it's just never been bigger in the history of the game. Those guys to me are so much fun to watch. They're so exciting to watch. And you just don't know necessarily where the great ones are going to come from. Guys emerge all the time. And so that group excites me. I want to see what they're able to do. And I'm also really looking forward to seeing who Georgia installs as their coach in order to develop them. I think that that's going to be an exciting consideration as well. So I don't know. I just love my pass rushers. It's fun. Pass rush is great to watch.
Another guy, since you named several, I'll name one more. Bear Alexander, somebody that we haven't really talked about on this at all. But I think that, and maybe it's just that he's wearing 99 in his, recruiting photos, but I think that there gives, and he's not nearly the size that Jordan Davis is, but he's got a little bit of a Jordan Davis vibe to him. And I think he's a more college ready prospect out of high school than Jordan was.
Yeah.
Now, is he the prospect that Jordan is right now? No, by no means can you expect a high school senior to match that of a college senior that'll go in the first round of the NFL draft. But there's a need there. Georgia has counted on Jordan Davis for the last 3.5 years. I mean, since he was, Jordan, even as a 3-star guy coming out of high school, stepped in and played big snaps for Georgia in that second half of his freshman season. I mean, I think back to that LSU and the LSU and Florida games, and the fact that he was in there as a big run stopper for Georgia.
Yeah,
I think that Bear Alexander can be the same kind of guy. And I think that what you're looking at is probably somebody with a higher ceiling as a freshman than what Jordan Davis had.
I would agree with that. I think that, I certainly agree with that assessment. I think if you're talking college readiness, I would definitely give the edge to Bear over Jordan. I really don't think people knew what they had in Jordan when he was coming out. I mean, there's a reason he was ranked the way that he was ranked. But simultaneously, I mean, he spent most of his senior year playing offensive tackle. And so, he was, you always hope to find guys like that. Don't get me wrong, but that's not the easiest thing to do. I mean, it's, if you could have a hit rate of 80% on something like that, you'd probably be he'd probably be an NFL GM, to be honest with you. So I think that I would absolutely agree. And I think that he is an exciting prospect. I think he's a guy who can get in there, be a run stuffer, and Georgia's kind of become established in the trenches. I think that they've really kind of taken that step forward. This year was a big, last year was huge in that regard. This year, I think, kind of solidified that, with the play of Devontae Wyatt, with the play of Jalen Carter, with Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, all of those guys were major contributors, and you heard them involved a lot. And I think that, they need that next generation of those guys. And, Bear Alexander, a great fit for that, in my opinion. I guess, Palmer, moving forward, what are you watching for? I mean, we've talked about Kristen, and we talked about Ernest and Shamar. I guess my question is, if you're looking at this team now, where's your biggest need?
It's going to come out of the transfer portal is what I would watch.
Of course. But I mean, positionally, where else do you think they need that?
I think that you would love to get a proven veteran wide receiver.
Yes.
I think that, Georgia, and ideally somebody that is incredibly fast. I think
you need to find this year's Jamison Williams.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, you need to find what you hope CJ Smith is 3 years down the road.
Yep.
You need to find that kind of player out of the transfer portal. I think that you've got to find a safety in the transfer portal. I think that, you're probably losing Lewis Seen, and the best way that Georgia could have made up for that probably would have been Kamari Wilson. Well, they don't hit on him. And I think Malachi Starks has the potential to be, a really good safety at the college level. But I don't know that you want to, even if it had been Kamari Wilson, I don't know that you want to rely on a freshman to lead your secondary.
Sure.
And I think that, so you're probably looking there. I think outside linebacker, a lot of people have pointed to that. I'm not as concerned about that because I think the way that the defensive ends and outside linebackers are used simultaneously in this system. And, the outside linebackers essentially play defensive end, and the inside linebackers get out in space like they're an outside linebacker. So I think that I'm not as concerned about that as some people would be. I might actually be even more concerned about the inside linebackers next year than I am the outside linebackers because of what you're losing in Channing Tindall, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker. Those guys are so good in space, so quick sideline to sideline. You're replacing them with somebody who's really impressed me, Jamon Dumas Johnson, this year.
Sure.
But I don't know that he is nearly as quick as those guys. And I don't know that he'll just be a sophomore, and he hasn't been counted on to be, one of the rotation guys. So inside linebacker might concern me even more than outside linebacker. I think that wide receiver certainly would be one. I think safety would certainly be another, and maybe a linebacker. And I think that those kind of fall in line with where Georgia, had their misses yesterday. They would have loved to get another, guy or two in the secondary, whether that was Wilson or Bowie or Travis Hunter. They would have loved to get any of those guys. They would have loved to keep Marcus Groves Killebrew. I think that, wide receiver, you were looking at Smoke Bowie or Travis Hunter to play wide receiver. And I think that that's where they missed yesterday. And then linebacker, Shamar James was a big miss there. So I think that those positions that I named certainly fall in line with where the not deficiencies are in this signing class, but where some of the misses were to potentially, go from really good to really great, or great to really great.
Sure. Yeah. For me, it's wide receiver for sure. That's the one that just jumps off the page, just because I think you want a proven commodity, a guy who's done it on the collegiate level and knows how to get it done. Like you said, if you can find somebody with a lot of speed, all the better. That's obviously that's what you want. Yeah, I came away from the day, thinking I think this is a great class. I mean, it's hard to conceive of the fact that Georgia signed 5 stars and they don't have the number 1 class in America. That's pretty stunning, to be honest with you. But hey, a lot of credit to Texas A&M. I mean, that to me, that's a program changing kind of class that they've got, can really, really shape their future. And then Alabama is just Alabama, right? They're going to recruit well every year. That's just the nature of who they are and what they do under Nick Saban. So, and Georgia, right there, I know 3 people are saying, that's the go look at the margins. I mean, the numbers between these guys. I mean, it's like fractional points is what you're talking about. It's not giant gaps between them. So, essentially services are just as high on Georgia's classes as they are the other 2. I mean, if you break it down into the rankings.
Yeah. And if you looked at, some of the other rankings, when A&M passed Georgia, for that number 1 spot, some of the other rankings still had Georgia as the number 1 class. And so, I think that goes to show, across the industry that things were really, really close between those 3 classes overall.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you.
And I mean, if it, like you said, Georgia signs 5 stars and doesn't pull the number 1 class. Well, they pulled the most 5 stars in the country, tied with Texas A&M. Now, A&M has a couple more, potential 5-star prospects out there. I would assume Alabama does as well, is at least in on them. Alabama's always in on, a player. But, I think that where Georgia, where Georgia, might be falling down in these rankings as compared to Texas A&M and Alabama is those 3-star guys that Georgia, signed. They signed 7 to a combined 2 between A&M and Alabama, 1 each. But I think that you've also got to remember some of Georgia's best football players over the last couple of years have been 3-star signees.
Yes.
Guys that Kirby Smart and his staff have done an incredible job of identifying and developing their talent. So, a 3-star to, Kirby always says he doesn't care whether they're a, 5-star, 4-star, 3-star, 1-star, 2-star, whatever. I think that what they see in some of these kids is the potential to develop them into 5-star players that are capable of going and being a high NFL draft pick. They don't really care what the recruiting industry says about a kid. They care what the NFL says about kids. Sure. And the NFL, doesn't start looking at these kids until 3 years from now after they've been developed in a college system for a little while.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And yeah, I give them a lot of credit because they trust their evaluations. They trust their in-person evaluations, and they hit on a lot of them, so they should. I think that's it for me, Paul. When it comes to the class, I think we've about talked the old girl to death, and we've got about 30 more articles to write on it. So if you need some more insight, you can come over to DawgsHQ and check that out. We'll have you covered there. But anything else for you, brother?
No, just ready to, headed home for a little bit for the holidays. And, we'll be coming back at you with some Orange Bowl coverage, previewing that game and coverage from Miami, headed down there before too long. I guess that's next week at this point that I'm headed down there. So.
No rest for the wicked, brother. It's absolutely. I mean, it's going to be bananas. Now Georgia, we move out of recruiting and we're back to team immediately. So make sure to get over to DawgsHQ. Check it out. We'll have you covered on all things Orange Bowl and Dogs, as well as, like I said, tons and tons of recap on this signing day and looking ahead into not just 2022's wrap, but we're going to start turning the page into 23 here pretty soon. So make sure to get over and check all that out. But For Palmer Toms and myself, Jake Roos, this has been another edition of Dawg Walk Talk presented to you by DawgsHQ. Thanks for tuning in.